Today we're talking about Patria, a 2020 Spanish historical drama mini TV series based on the 2016 novel of the same name by Fernando Aramburu. So what aspects of Patria show us true historical events? What other context can help us better understand the show? What do the main characters represent as historical guides to self-determination struggles and terrorism in post-Franco era Spain? I will contextualize three historical aspects of the show. First is Basque nationalism, second is Spanish dictator Franco's treatment of the Basques, and third is the seeming paradox of the post-Franco democracy coupled with increased ETA attacks under democracy. The two main women protagonists of the show, Bittori and Miren, used to be close friends, but the radicalization of Miren's son, José Marie, as a member of ETA creates a distance between them, until Bittori's husband, Txato, is murdered by ETA in the 1980s. The series begins with this murder and then shifts to the 2010s when ETA declares a ceasefire and Bittori returns to her hometown 20 years after the murder of her husband in order to confront the past and seek answers about who is responsible for his death. Her return to the town sets the stage for the central narrative of the series, exploring the lasting impact of the murder on her family, the community, and her relationship with her former best friend, Miren. We can see the families of Bittori and Miren as microcosms, and that their characters represent a smaller-scale reflection of the larger Basque conflict, showing how the macro-political and ideological struggle manifest in the micropersonal relationships and emotions between characters. In the 1980s, ETA was highly active in carrying out attacks. But what is ETA? ETA is an acronym for Euskadi ta Askatasuna, which in Basque language means Basque homeland and liberty. This social movement was founded in 1959 by students frustrated by the moderate stance of the Basque Nationalist Party. ETA's motto was Bieten Harai, keep up on both, and relates to the symbol, with the snake representing politics wrapped around an axe which represents armed struggle. The movement was an armed Basque nationalist and leftist separatist organization in the Basque Country from 1959 until 2018, with a variety of different fractures of the movement. These movements were influenced by various revolutionary movements, including the Cuban Revolution and Algeria's War of Independence. ETA's goal at first was cultural preservation, and independence and autonomy for the region. After 1968, ETA began targeting police, military, fascist leaders, businessmen, prison officers, judges, prosecutors, professors and journalists who opposed armed separatism, and increasingly civilians in major bombings in the post-1975 period. Their activities caused widespread fear as well as support at different junctures in time, mainly supported by hardliner separatists in its final decades. In total, between 829 to 952 people were killed in 3,000 or so attacks from 1968 to 2011, with many more injured. To understand this movement, we do have to go back to the years under the Spanish dictator General Francisco Franco, who ruled from 1939 to 1975, and we need to better understand Basque nationalism and the struggle for self-determination. Firstly, Basque nationalism favors the political unification of all of the Basque-speaking provinces in Spain and France, and Basques have long fought for territorial autonomy against outside centralizing pressures. For analyzing the show Patria, let's only go back to the beginning of the 20th century. Basque nationalism had been in a period of turmoil in the years after the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War lasted from 1936 to 1939 and was waged between Republicans, mainly consisting of socialist, communist, separatist, anarchist, and Republican parties, and the opposing nationalists who were an alliance of Phalangists, monarchists, conservatives, and traditionalists, led by a military junta through which General Francisco Franco quickly achieved an important role. The nationalist forces ended up receiving munitions, soldiers, and air support from fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, and ended up winning. This launched Franco to power. In 1937, the Condor Legion bombed the Basque town of Guernica. The bombing of Guernica had a strong effect on international opinion, with Pablo Picasso painting the famous painting of Guernica. Franco strictly outlawed the use of Basque language and cultural festivals and gatherings. Only within the family and the household could Basque children learn of their heritage, their language, and politics, whereas public spaces strictly forbade these topics. This led to a generational gap where young Basques witnessed the humiliation, frustration, defeat, shame, trauma, and fear of repression of their parents. Their parents were forced to suppress their political leanings, whereas the younger generation viewed direct action, resistance, and increasingly violence as the only way forward to free themselves and their families. To make matters worse, the Basque Nationalist Party and 150,000 or so Basque people were exiled after the Spanish Civil War to avoid retaliation from the Franco regime. From 1959 to 1968, ETA evolved from an emerging cultural and intellectual movement into an armed struggle. One turning point of ETA was in 1968 with its first killing, the assassination of Melitón Manzanas, a former police chief known for torturing Basque prisoners. The ensuing Burgos Trial exposed the Spanish state's widespread usage of torture against Basque people, while confirming that Spaniards and Basques alike would have risen in protest against the Franco regime. Over the next 2 years, thousands of suspected ETA members or sympathizers were indiscriminately arrested throughout the Basque Country, which sent many ETA members into exile over fear of detainment. In 1975, during the final months of Francisco Franco's dictatorship in Spain, ETA proposed the following 5 conditions in order for them to abandon the armed struggle. 1. Amnesty for all Basque prisoners. 2. Legislation of separatist Basque parties. 3. The withdrawal of Spanish police from Euskadi. 4. The improvement of the working class living conditions. And 5. An autonomy statute that allowed for Basque self-determination. These demands were rejected by the Spanish government, and Madrid passed a new anti-terrorist law in 1978 that reintroduced repressive policing methods reminiscent of Franco's era, further entrenching the conflict between ETA and the Spanish state during their fragile transition to democracy. After Franco's death in 1975, rather than seeing a new democracy as a place for Basque nationalism to win political independence, ETA rather further committed itself to armed struggle in the years during and after the transition to a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system. The aims of these attacks were to keep the notion of Basque independence firmly in the minds of those in power. This was caused by the character of the Spanish transition, since it was based on this pact of forgetting after 1975. Many Francoist officials in the army, the police, and judiciary retained their posts, and no attempt really was made to hold the representatives of the Francoist regime responsible for political violence and oppression. This is best shown in the show through the repressive policing methods that we see in episode 3, for example, when Nerea wants to go with her friends to an homage event for a Basque person, but they are stopped by a police checkpoint, and the police are quite harsh, and they criticize them for calling the city that they're going by its Basque name rather than the Castilian name. The police create an atmosphere of fear and tension and even gendered violence. The interaction with the Guardia Civil, the Spanish civil guard, highlights the oppressive nature of the authorities and the increasing surveillance in the Basque country during this period. It also serves to underscore the divide between the Basque population and the Spanish security forces, which serves to radicalize the youth as they perceive these checkpoints as humiliations and provocations. In another scene, the Guardia ransack Miren's house looking for evidence of José Mari's activities, and it shows the brutality of the police. This was behavior the police may have given to many suspected of ETA activities, whether they were involved or not. In the scene, they throw their family's belongings on the ground and force them to stand outside in the cold. They also threaten them by saying that they are sure that they'll find guns in the house if they don't cooperate with them. The show also depicts the security service's recurrent use of torture against ETA militants and suspects, and an official study recently numbered this as in the thousands. 94 ETA members were killed by state security and 73 by para-police forces. There are 4,113 documented cases of police torture of ETA suspects, and experts on the conflict unanimously agree that the real number is far higher. The end of ETA, with its dissolution in 2019, has hardly provided a sense of closure in Spain. Either way, the fractures and questionable decisions by ETA hardliners in the movement led to discontent amongst many Basque communities, and their support base slowly chipped away, especially during the drastic increase in ETA-caused deaths in 1979 and 1980, as illustrated in the show. Major bombing events that claimed the lives of innocent civilians were significant turning points for Basque communities. These acts of violence, intended as part of their struggle for independence, often fractured public opinion and has left lasting scars. For many victims and their families, even those who may sympathize with the broader goals of the Basque nationalist movement, the indiscriminate targeting of bystanders made it impossible to reconcile with the methods that they used. Today, it remains profoundly challenging for victims to move forward, especially when perpetrators may show no remorse for their actions. Forgiveness becomes even harder when the justification for such violence persists, as seen in the show through José María. The show leaves it ambiguous whether José María regrets his actions, but it does demonstrate subtle signs of inner conflict within him and a possible shift in his perspective, but it is still ambiguous whether he fully regrets his actions. The friendship between Txato and Joxian is also very heartbreaking in the show, detailing the power that ETA had in intimidating people. Another important character is Arantxa, the daughter of Miren. She's kind of like a bridge character between the families, offering the hope of reconciliation. Arantxa suffers an event that leaves her partially paralyzed and reliant on her family for care. Arantxa strongly disapproves of Miren, her mother's unwavering support for ETA, and the hostility she has towards Bittori. Through Arantxa's perspective, we really see the human cost of the conflict and the stubbornness of these entrenched ideologies. We also see the high levels of stress and tension in her life, stemming from being a woman from a working-class family, the fractured relationships with her family, and the overarching societal conflict in the Basque Country. Her character highlights how prolonged conflict and emotional burden take a toll on community members, not just physically, but also psychologically.